Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I'm going to start the first of 3 videos looking at the recently released B&M exclusive Doctor Who action figure sets. And wow, these sets are like buses because when they come all at once. And this time we had no less than 6 sets. We had 3 Dalek sets, a TARDIS set, and 2 3 action figure sets. So without further ado, I'm going to kick off with the creation of the Dalek set. Now, I'm not entirely sure what the difference is between this set and the history of the Dalek set. They seem to be treated quite differently. Obviously, this is called Creation of the Daleks. But interestingly enough, History of the Daleks set 11 is actually a genesis of the Daleks set, which accompanies this quite nicely. So I'm not quite sure why this isn't simply set 12, part 2 of Genesis of the Daleks. But nevertheless, it's been treated as a separate entity and we'll treat it as such. So, looking at the packaging, we can see that they've adopted the traditional packaging that we've seen from B&M over recent years. So this is the old style History of the Daleks kind of packaging, if you will. It is mostly window display where we can see the 2 figures inside. Of course, we have Davros there and we have that first Dalek, which is brilliant. And we have an inlay behind that as well, which we'll look at a little bit closer in a moment. Then we have the standard Doctor Who branding with the police box and the sort of blue and grey design, which, as you probably know by now, I'm not a huge fan of this just because it seems quite simple and a bit lifeless. It needed a bit more colour from my perspective, but overall this is still quite attractive and quite displayable. Now if we look at the side panel, of course we do see the TARDIS doors. This is a nice approach, I've always liked this, but again I just wish I had a bit more colour to it to make it a bit more fun and distinctive. And then on the reverse of the packaging, we just have this little bit of bio here about the story and about some of the behind the scenes activity as well, which is quite cool. I've always quite liked this little write-up that we get here. It's a bit informative and a little bit more in-depth than you would normally get on any kind of toy packaging. So I think this is quite good. Again, in terms of the design, it's not particularly attractive or displayable, but as I said, the information contained here is actually quite fun for a fan. Now, I do really like this inner inlay. This is a thick card in tray and it works really, really well. We have seen these before and I always really like this effort. It's a mini diorama to put your figures in. Of course, this is taken directly from Genesis of the Daleks in that sort of bunker testing zone that we see very early on in the serial. So this is really nice and atmospheric. I think they've done a really nice job bringing this to life, and it is a fantastic little diorama to put your figures in. Sadly, this is something that's now missing from the History of the Daleks set. They just have a nominal sort of blank background, which is a real shame, and I think this is all to do with cost savings because those sets are still priced at £20 or £22, I suppose. They've gone up slightly, whereas this Creation of the Daleks set is a little bit more expensive at £25. So, starting off with the Genesis Dalek. Now, this is a pretty special Dalek, as many fans will know, because it is sort of the first fully functional, real Dalek in history. And in terms of the look and feel and then dimensions, of course, Character Options have got this down to a fine art. We've had many Daleks in recent years, and yeah, they're pretty much perfect, really. You can't fault them. So what's special or unique or distinctive about this particular Dalek? Well, I think a lot of it just comes down to that gun arm there. As you can see, there is that sort of brass sort of colouring that he has on the ball joint and in the socket there. Everything else about this Dalek is pretty standard and uniform with any other Daleks from this particular story. We can see at the bottom, he's got some nice paint applications on the bottom of the skirt there where we can see there's a little bit of scuff marks, which is a nice touch. I like that little bit of extra detail. There's nothing new in terms of articulation. He does, of course, have a swivel at the top of the dome there, so that dome can rotate all the way around. There is another hinge at the eye stalk, so the eye stalk looks up and down as you would hope. And then of course he's got the 2 ball joints for the plunger and the gun arm as well, which of course can rotate in pretty much any direction you want. The added benefit though is that with this other gun arm here is that it will actually pop out, and I think that is an intentional choice because when we first see this Dalek in the show, he doesn't actually have his gun arm and then the ear's given it later on. So I think this is a really nice little extra touch. I do believe it's intentional, and I'm really grateful for it because I think that's really cool to have 2 distinct looks for this particular Dalek. And of course, here we have Davros. This is the original Davros, the first Davros as played by Michael Wisher. This is an absolutely fantastic figure, a much wanted version to finally have a re-release because of course he was only released once as part of a special deluxe Genesis the Daleks set that was released many years ago as an exclusive to Underground Toys or Forbidden Planet. I really like the sculpting on this figure. I think they've done a tremendous job of capturing the likeness of this version of Davros, and I really like the paint apps as well because we can see they've not just got the the moulded plastic there, but there's actually a wash running over it as well to give it a lot more depth and texture. It's a lot darker, and it's really nice to see some of those lighter patches peeking through as well. So I really like what they've done here. I think this works very, very nicely. I have some reservations about some of the bits and pieces around his head there. I think they look a little bit larger perhaps in scale than they appear in the show, but I might be wrong, and that might just be a very minor criticism anyway. Overall, you can't really fault this sculpt or the paint apps. They've done an absolute tremendous job of it, and I think it looks fantastic. In terms of how it compares with the original release, you can quite clearly see the difference in the paint apps. This original release didn't really have this extra wash running through it, didn't have the same level of texture. Obviously, it's going to be up to you whether you have a personal preference, but I actually really like this re-release version. I think it's actually slightly superior in that sense. And also, the overall colours seem a lot darker on the headset this time around, whereas they seem a lot brighter and more colourful in the original release. Now, the dimensions of the Dalek skirt and his little dashboard here is really, really nicely put together. I would confidently say that this is probably pretty perfect, to be honest. And I really love all these different switches and the different plastics they've used there and the different colours we can see. I think this looks really, really colourful and really fun and pretty authentic to what we see on screen. And as we saw with the Genesis Dalek, they've actually added in some paint apps at the very bottom of the skirt here to show some scuff marks as well, which is pretty cool because of that lived-in, realistic approach, and added little detail like this is what it's all about. Now, if this is your first Davros, you may be surprised to see there's this incongruous little shape cut into the bottom of the skirt and wonder what it's all about. Well, the reason for that is because the original release was for the Resurrection of the Dalek set, in which this was a removable panel, which Davros, of course, has a secret little container inside. And they've never updated this figure for the other subsequent releases to just hide this, because, of course, on these other releases, this isn't removable. So it does seem a little bit of a shame that they haven't adjusted this to just make it perfectly smooth. And as you'd expect, Davros is pretty limited when it comes to articulation, but he does have some. He does have a swivel at his shoulder there, so he can move this arm up and down, and there is a swivel at the bicep as well, so he can move it from side to side. This is complemented by a single joint at the elbow, so he can arch his arm to about 90 degrees, and of course his hand will rotate 360 degrees around as well. There is a swivel at the neck, so he can move his head from side to side, but it's not a huge range of motion, to be honest. He also comes with these two power pack accessories. I'm not entirely sure what these are. I don't remember them being in the show. It's been a long time since I saw this serial, but I'm sure obviously they're pretty screen accurate and they will serve a specific function. So quite cool to have some extra accessories here, quite nicely sculpted and quite nicely painted. I'm pretty sure this is going to be a major hit. In fact, I think this is probably the most successful of the sets released in this wave. I'm guessing that these sets are going to fly off the shelf as soon as they arrive, because this classic Davros being re-released for the first time in years and that original release being an exclusive and quite difficult to track down is going to be really, really sought after. So fantastic that we've actually got him again. Lovely this extra detail of having the Dalek with him. I really like this approach. I think it's worked very, very nicely. And I think there's some lovely little details and a lot of love and care has gone into producing this set in particular. So I think they've done a very nice job with this. I can be quite critical of character options sometimes, and some of their releases leave me scratching my head, but I have to say this is a really worthy release, and I think they've done a tremendous job of it all in all. And it's this kind of thing that we want to see as fans. This is the kind of re-release that we really appreciate, because yes, it's a re-release, but it's actually slightly enhanced and it adds something, and it's also one of those very difficult characters, or one of those difficult figures that many collectors didn't get a chance to get hold of the first time. So a re-release like this is very, very special and very worthy, and I wish they'd do more like this. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and remember to subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos soon.